Self. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All
Yep.
right. All right. I'm so happy to be here to give all of you guys a super brief background to this. This is a very, very simple show. I just finished an album and released it, and I'm working on the next one. And I figured I could use some tips. The tips are mostly about inspiration, about mic placement, song choices, but it comes down to getting a certain in the studio that it's very, very, very difficult to capture. So I figured I'd call some people and see if I can roam their brains. So our guest today, Dom, how are you? How is
I'm very
everything?
good, thank you. All good over
All
here.
right, I'm so happy to have you.
Good to be here.
So I gotta ask you, did you really send her to rehab, and did she really say no, no, no? Is that a true story?
Apparently, yeah. So I wasn't there for the songwriting process, but apparently, she
I'm
walked
joking.
in.
I'm joking.
No,
I'm
she
joking.
walked
So
into Mark and said, and literally said the line, "They tell me to go to rehab," and I said, "No, no, no." And Mark was like, "That's a song. Let's start with that." So
there
yeah,
you go.
apparently
There you
that is
go.
yeah.
So I have a few questions, but let's get the important things first. How are you guys? Are you guys safe? How you guys been dealing with this the last 6 months?
Okay, actually, so this my room, which you can kind of see, this is where I work out of, and it's like a detached kind of brick barn behind a really big old, almost stately home, like massive house in the middle of nowhere. I call it Tolkien country because this is like Tolkien taught at Oxford University, and this is the area that you could imagine hobbits live.
Nice,
Yeah,
nice.
so I'm kind of isolated. I'm more isolated at work than I am anywhere else. So I've just been able to keep coming in and working. The
I,
only
I
juggling
feel
I've got
I
three
feel the
kids.
same way.
Right.
Like when they imposed quarantine here, I was like, I'm a jazz musician. I'm a guitarist. I've been quarantining my whole life. Just give me a
Yeah.
guitar in the same room.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm
Mix
gonna lock
engineers.
the
Well,
phone
this
as it
is
is.
life. Yeah. Mix engineers do this
So,
every day. So
so three albums that inspired you during this time. We had a lot of time to listen to music. Just
okay. I tell you what, I've been listening to weirdly. I don't know why I got into the Cocteau Twins again. So I've gone back to
ah,
Cocteau Twins. Probably Heaven of Las Vegas is the one I've listened to more of. Also, I really like Alessandro Cortini, and there's who's a no, Berliner as well. Actually, he lives in Berlin now. Um,
cool.
so he's the keyboard player from Nine Inch Nails. For people who don't know what he does,
Hook me up.
yeah,
Mainly
his
because we've been here for a year. I don't really know anyone. I mean, I have two
okay.
friends. Both of them are you, basically. so, so yeah.
Yeah, well, his stuff I really like is like his own stuff is really kind of big, expansive keyboard synth soundtracky stuff. And then another one I just discovered recently, which I'm really pleased about discovering. So I really like the Portishead album Third, which
Yeah.
is quite out there, but I love it. And I've never found anything that felt like it was a thread to that. Like something they might have been listening to that made them then make those tracks and those sounds. And then I just recently discovered the band Silver Apples, who are from I think the 60s or 70s, and their album Silver Apples. It sounds you can hear Portishead were definitely listening to that when they made Third. So I'm really
Check it
pleased.
out.
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
So, and when you listen to music, how do you do that? Streaming, CDs, vinyl?
Um,
What's your take on that?
well, it's a good question because another thing that I've done in since we've been locked down and stuff is I've got back into vinyl. So I finally bought a cartridge for my turntable because the cartridge was broken years ago. Bought a cartridge.
Which did you get?
I've got a Riga P3, and it
Ah,
was I've forgotten the name of the cartridge. It was about 300 quid or something like that.
I was trying to decide between the Riga and the P3, but I went for the clear audio concept, which is
Yeah,
more
yeah,
or less the same, but I upgraded the tone arm and the cable, and then I upgraded the cartridge, and from one thing led to another,
that's how it
and
works.
I owe some people some money, and we'll put it at that.
Right, yeah. So you upgrade one thing, and then you hear like actually be better if I, because then I bought another phono amp. That'd be better. And now I'm thinking I could get some bigger speakers.
Exactly,
That'd be good.
exactly,
Bigger speakers would
exactly.
be good. Yeah.
So, and you buy your vinyl used, new, like you hunt for it. What's the deal?
Well, I've managed to. So I've got a few kicking around from over the years, that I didn't get rid of, even though I wasn't really playing them. So I've got a few of those, and then I've just been the stuff that I've bought more lately has just been new things. Like there's a friend of mine called Saint Savior. Her album came out last week, so I bought that one on vinyl, which is great.
What's your name?
Saint Savior. She
Ah,
actually got the album of the day on BBC Six Music today, which is a really cool thing. So
very
good
cool.
for her. That's her third record. She sang on some stuff for me a while back, and we've been friends for years and years and years. So
Ah, I'll check it out.
yeah, so that's really nice. She's got an incredible voice, really beautiful voice. And then I've been buying other things, like I bought the Alessandro Cortini Avanti thing from a while back just because I wanted it on vinyl now, and
Yeah.
a couple other things like that, just so I have it on vinyl because it's nicer, So, and I bought a Pixies box set years ago, which has got loads of artwork and all sorts of stuff, and then a load of really good vinyl. So I've been playing that a lot as well.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, I've been waiting every day for my girlfriend to leave the house so I
Right.
can crack the volume to the point where the blood is coming out of the kitty's ears, and the walls are like it's like a vibrating cell.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's really nothing quite like it.
Yeah.
So I have a few questions.
Okay.
In the album that just came out, I'd love to send you one, by the way.
Yeah.
I feel that, and I'm sure that every guitarist feels this way, I'm not getting exactly the sound that I want.
Okay.
And I never know if it's just a matter of keep playing with the equipment. Is it the guitar that I mean, what's your take? Is it changing a cable and changing a pickup, or is it mic placement? What do you usually do? Just to get like your ideal.
Yeah, I sort of start from the beginning, really, as in start from the pickup, play with those options, and make sure we're getting as close to what we want with the pickup. And then the next thing is you go to the amp or the pedals if they've got some pedals going on, and just at each stage play with the different elements that you've got and go, okay, that's, I've put, say, an overdrive pedal in, and I've played with that, so I've got the best out of the overdrive. So now I know I'm on the right pickup. The overdrive pedal is the right thing. So now I'm going to go to the amp and I'm going to play with that until coming out of the amp.
Do you have after all these years, do you have favorite amps?
To be honest, the only one I have in my studio that's just the one sort of standard one that I have kicking around is there's the PV5150, which, because I had a deal with PV a little while ago and they gave me that.
Yeah, so that's a classic.
Yeah, it's a great amp, and occasionally, people will come down that bring their own amp, so then we get that plugged in and use that instead. If anyone wants, obviously I'm up for what anyone's sound is, but if anyone is not particularly, tied to, I have to use an AC30 or I have to use a Marshall or whatever, and they just turn up, then, I can normally get what I want out of the 5150. It is, it's a great amp, and it's versatile.
It's a legendary amp. I think especially our generation grew up on that sound.
Yeah.
When Eddie just came out with it, and then Alice in Chains started using it. A lot of people started using that amp.
Yeah.
For like a period of 10 years, it was like, and it's still, we have one right next door. I haven't used it once because I'm a jazz guy, but
yeah, sure, yeah.
And you usually turn. How loud is the amp for you to get the sweet spot on like 1 to 10 or whatever scale is?
Yeah, it's kind of nuts around the middle to pushed like 6 or 7, maybe around there. I've got a power soak so I don't kind of blow people away before I get
Which one do you use?
Hold on, I'm gonna have a look. A Weber Mass 200 is. Does that make sense? That one. Yeah, it sounds good. Sounds cool. Good. Yeah.
So, okay, so and favorite mics to mic a guitar amp?
I like the Royer. The Royer 121. I think that's a nice ribbon. I sort of used a Coles a lot, but I slightly prefer the Royer. I think it's got a touch more brightness than the Coles on an amp. and then I have a Audix i5 as well, which is like their 57. I just, you know,
Okay.
to me the two are interchangeable. I just happen to have an i5, and that's what I've got stuck out there. So
Yeah.
yeah,
For my money, every time I try to mix another, mic with the 57, I almost never use it, and it's not because we're unsure. I just haven't. I guess it's between my ear being used to that sound
yeah.
to. I mean, I just never. I was never able to get something that sounded better for the room or better for the whatever.
The thing is, it's that question. It's a bit like the kind of the question about lexicon and reverb. Is that, does lexicon make the best reverbs, or have we just heard lexicon and reverb so much that to us that sounds like a record? And it's the same with like a Shure 57 on a snare or on a guitar cab. Is that the best sound, or is that just the sound of a record to us now? Because we've heard it so much. So
actually,
yeah,
I've been working with Gibson guitars for a while.
nice.
And it turns out that to get that sound, you have to have a Gibson. I mean, the distance between the different notes on the guitar, which is called frets, whoever is interested, are just so specific, and specifically not perfectly in tamper tuning, just to get super specific. But it's such a specific sound, and you just cannot get it anywhere else. But then I just went through another rabbit hole, and I found a 1953 jazz box in like it's like there's no original parts, but the wood has been blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And it's coming in tonight, and then we're going to restore it, but really get the old sound.
Yeah.
So next question. You have the perfect sound.
Okay.
What's your take on getting the best performance out of your guy? I mean, are you a first take guy, a 13 take guy, a bottle of wine sort of thing in a session, or let's just keep coffee and keep folk?
Coffee definitely, less wine. It all depends what you're looking for. So I want to know from the band, which generally, if I'm producing, by the time we've got to doing overdubs and guitars and stuff, I probably know already. But I want to know what emotion I'm supposed to be feeling when I hear this, when I hear the track. I see the job as producer as kind of audience ground zero. So I'm sitting there thinking, I'm supposed to be feeling this by what I'm hearing him play. Am I feeling it yet? So I approach it with that, and then I will go however many takes it requires in order to get that feeling. And what I'm doing while I'm doing this is I'm using different adjectives to say to the whoever's playing, can you make it a bit more excited, angry, aggressive, whatever adjective it is, and eventually I'll hit on one that to that player means the thing that makes them hit it the right way, so that as an audience member I feel the thing I'm supposed to feel. And to be honest, I have once with a guitarist who was a really chilled guy. He was lovely, and he had to do quite an aggressive part, and it wasn't quite natural to him. So in the end, I ended up getting a pencil. And I have everybody sat next to me. I don't have a booth or anything. I like being in the same room. And every time I felt the aggression drop off a little bit, I just poked him in the leg with a pencil. And I think he got quite annoyed, but he did do it. Then it was great because the aggression never dropped because he was getting angrier and angrier. But it worked. It worked.
So I'm going back one step. You said when you're overdubbing guitar. Are you everyone live in the same room kind of guy, or you want people rhythm section first and then the guitarist and the vocalist, or everyone's completely separated?
I tend to do it so that so we concentrate on people individually. So when we record the drums, you've got as many people as possible in the room, so that it's as much as a live recording as possible.
Yeah.
And then I'll normally keep the parts that we've recorded from anyone else, and then see if we can get them better by going over it again, more focused, sat next to me in the control room rather than in the live room with headphones on. And it's not always, but normally I can get a better performance out of somebody in that situation.
Interesting.
The live room. Sometimes it's a case of chopping between the two. There was a track I was mixing the other day, which is something that I produced, and the bass was a bit of a challenge because it was half bass in the room. You know, the cab had the room noise of the drums on it, and
Yeah.
then it was chopped in between with that and not, because it was a bit half and half between the stuff in the room and the stuff we'd done in the control room afterwards. So I'm open to whatever's better, you know, but I will always try. We'll always have a go at an overdub and see if that gets a better result.
All right. I'm gonna ask last couple technical questions because it's my chance to kind of.
Yeah.
When you're mixing, how loud, how soft?
I mix quietly, and there were two reasons for that. I mix quietly because I want to protect my ears, because I mostly mix, and if I'm doing it really loud, then my ears are going to get trashed.
What?
Exactly. Yeah. I don't want to be that guy. And secondly, when things are loud, they're exciting. Like, they're automatically exciting. So I want it to be quiet and exciting. I see that's kind of the job of the mix, is to make it exciting at any volume. So you kind of fool yourself a bit when you turn it up, that it's like, wow, it sounds great. But you need to feel that when it's down quiet as well. So
and you compare, I'm assuming you compare different monitors. Any favorite ones?
I've got Neumann, what are they called? 310s, which I really like,
Right.
and NS10s, the standard Yamaha NS10s, which are the main ones. I have a pair of Avantones as well, which are like the old Auratone thing. So I have those too. And then I use Grado headphones quite a lot as well, the SR325s, I think they are. Grado 325s, which I use a lot. I find them really, really useful. And I've recently got a pair of Focal headphones, the Clear Pros, which I'm getting into using. So
Yeah, I hear they're very specific.
yeah, they're very good. I'm just not as used to them yet as I am to the other stuff. So, you know, have a little bit of a go, have a listen, see if I can hear something I haven't heard on the other things.
I always feel I'm such a touring guy.
Yeah,
At least I was until 2020.
yeah,
And that for me, the thing that sounds the best, the thing that I know the most, like the guitar that I know the most, I'm the most comfortable with.
yeah, exactly.
I'm gonna sound the best. You know, I'm just gonna
Yeah.
sound the best. You know, no matter if even if I get a better sounding whatever on a different guitar.
Yeah, so it reminds me, the first session I ever did that I assisted on was one for Tony Iommi, and he obviously had a lot of Gibsons, you know, in the room,
Yeah,
but he had one that he referred to as number one, which was like the one that he'd had for so many years, and the paint had
classic one.
mostly come off because it had been set on fire a few times. And
I think they're just reissuing it.
oh,
That
really?
exact replica of that. I think they just, there's a very, very cool. I just saw a very, very cool thing with him. He's kind of amazing. But
Yeah,
speaking
absolutely.
about Tony Iommi and Back in Black or Back to Black, you're working with someone like that, where he played things that everyone, you go to Nicaragua or you go to Tokyo, people know that sound.
Yeah,
And I mean, and you say it's your first session.
yeah, that was pretty
I
mind
mean,
blowing. Yeah, it was
what does it
pretty
feel
mind.
like put me in that space for a sec.
I know the thing is, it's pretty mind blowing, but you know, he's a nice guy. You know, it was him and Glenn Hughes was singing, and Don Airey from Rainbow, was he from? Was on keyboards, and you know, it was a bit of a super group because it was Tony Iommi and some friends, but
All
they're all
right.
really nice people. So it made it quite easy to just settle in and me to just get on and do my job, you know. And then it was my first session, so it was just make cups of tea, make sure the engineer had everything that he needed, and just kind of.
Wait. At a certain age in Tony Iommi's life, it goes to tea from hardcore drugs. That's what you're telling me?
I guess, yeah. I presume he probably. I mean, I imagine in the 70s a bit of that was involved, but no, that wasn't. He was very sensible.
So I'm continuing with that line of
Yeah,
questioning.
yeah, okay.
You go into a session and it's fucking Amy Winehouse, and you make an album, and
Yeah,
it's album of the year at the Grammys, and every kid anywhere in the world sings those songs. My first, the first time I heard the songs were, I just moved back to Tel Aviv from New York, and I needed any gig that came in.
Hmm.
and someone called me and see if I can produce something for her. And she goes to the piano and she's singing those songs, and I haven't heard them before.
Right.
And I'm like, well, I'm not getting this.
Right.
And then I went home and listened to that album for the first time, and I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so what is the difference? Explain to me. From hearing, it's the same fucking songs.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean,
that's a really good question. The reason why is because I noticed something recently, and it was about the idea of somebody's favorite song, right? When someone says my favorite song is X, I think they don't normally mean that. They mean my favorite production. And the reason why is because I had always said my favorite song since being a teenager, right, was a track called Where Is My Mind by the Pixies, right? That's
right?
the track that made me want to start a band, and when I was 14 and everything. And I still love it. And then I heard a few people cover it and I thought, oh, I don't like that. And then I thought, well, how can I not like it if it's my favorite song? So, because then the song's still the same, as you discover, you're sitting there hearing somebody do a song with a piano and think, nah, it's okay. And then you hear the production and go, this is amazing. So I think if you, it's worth thinking about that with anyone, little thought experiment, anyone think their favorite song is, it may not be. And in which case, I think, because I'm not a massive country fan, it's okay, but it's not something I particularly get into. But I love Wichita Lineman. So maybe Wichita Lineman is my favorite song because I love it, even though the production isn't necessarily my thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's the thing. When people hear when you're hearing a song, you're actually hearing the whole production when you're hearing a record, and everything is feeding into your love of it. The mood that's been created and all the different parts that come out in the mix at the right time. Those things are all propelling your love of the song. So yeah, and that's also, I think, that's interesting about when people mix, is that they don't realize how important a mix is, because people will define the song and their love of the song by the mix. Like, I had another good story. I've got loads of these stories. I was with my brother once, and there was a Black Eyed Peas track came on the radio. Was it Black Eyed Peas? No, Red Hot Chili Peppers, right? And he likes the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and he said, I don't like this song. And I was thinking, yeah, it sounds kind of, it's Red Hot Chili Peppers sort of stuff, is standard thing. But the mix was really weird. The vocal was really loud and it was separated from the rest of the track. It was an odd kind of thing going on. And I said, it's just a weird mix. Like, the vocal's really loud. It sounds odd on the radio. And he went, oh, yeah, the song's all right. But actually, that is weird. And because he doesn't work in music, he would never make the connection that it's actually the mix he didn't like. So he says, I don't like this song. I think that's worth bearing in mind for engineers and everybody, that how important it is, because everyone will judge the song based on how they heard it, which is the production and the mix and everything else.
I think that's something that's not really spoken about at all. I know that many of my favorite albums were, they had a mix and they were almost going to print, but then they changed their mind, and then many albums, it could be Appetite for Destruction, or it could be U2's African Baby.
Yeah.
They were mixed by 3 different people, and they compare the mixes. And I mean, like, sometimes a band would finish an album. Someone just sent me an album a couple of days ago and asked me to pass it to Ropedo. And I said, listen, I could, but this mix is going to kill you. The mix and the mastering.
Yeah.
No one, I mean, you can hear that someone doesn't understand the genre.
Yeah.
And the impact that it's supposed to have.
Yeah.
So I'm going back to Amy Winehouse.
Okay.
She's there in the vocal booth. You hear it through the monitors.
Yeah.
What does it sound like?
You know what? I was shocked by Amy. And I work with, I've been very fortunate, and I've worked with some amazing singers and some people that, have been, very famous for this. Like, the only people that I'd worked with that I thought that were as good as her were people like Mick Jagger, Rod Stewart, Roger Daltrey, people, but the point being, people that had been doing it for 40 years longer than I've been doing it. And just the ability to walk in and just deliver an incredible performance without any need to get into it, to warm up. That takes so many years of practice. And
Yeah.
she had it at 26. It just didn't make sense to me, because I'm not a big believer in talent. I think talent is just
Neither
practice.
do I. Neither
And
do I.
lots of practice.
I
The people that are the
mean,
most talented are the ones that practice more than everybody else. So
I'm not a believer in talent, and I'm not a believer in inspiration.
yeah, inspiration just, I heard a great quote. It was Picasso. I think it was Picasso said, inspiration exists, but it has to find you working.
That's a really good one.
Yeah, so he would just go in every day and paint, and eventually something would come to him. But he would go in and work. You know, he would just work. It's habit. Habit's
Yeah,
more important than inspiration.
my favorite one, and I forget who said that, but I keep stealing it, is inspiration is for kids. The rest of us just show up and go to work.
Yeah, that's great. That's really great. Yeah. But that was the thing. So Amy came in. I only worked on one lead vocal, which was a track called He Can Only Hold Her, because she was around the world and Mark was around the world. So things got recorded in a lot of different places. So I only did one lead vocal, which was the track He Can Only Hold Her. And she basically did 3 takes. They were all amazing in a slightly different style.
Yeah.
And then I remember turning to Mark and going, I don't know how you pick. Like, what do you do with that? Like, they're all great. You've just got to pick a style. Mad.
And that's it. 3 takes, and she's home.
Yeah. It was unbelievable. I really haven't worked with anyone like that. And you know, I've obviously worked with some great people, but that good at 26.
Wow.
Nobody. It was amazing.
So I'm going to Chasing Pavements. That whole album. What was the process? What was it like in the studio? I think she, from what I'm understanding as a fan, she also seems like a first, second take sort of person, and it kind of seems like that just she opens her mouth and that's the way it is.
Yeah. Well, so I only worked. So this was all the time I was Mark Ronson's engineer in London, basically. So we only did a 1 track on that album, which is called Cold Shoulder. But that was, you know, with her and a band and all, you know, and everybody. And she wasn't quite Amy good at that stage. I mean, this was her first album, if you remember, and that was Amy's second. But she was very, very good. It was clear that, you know, she was excellent. She wasn't a normal singer. And she was also exceptionally lovely and down to earth and very nice. What you can, the impression that you get from her, of her being just a down to earth girl from South London, is that's what she was, absolutely. So that was nice. And then it's always great when people like that, you know, take off, as you know, not many people take off as much as Adele did, but you know, it's great to see them get the success that they deserve.
And could you hear that in the studio for those 2 albums? Could you be in the studio and say to yourself, I think this is going to explode, or it's all just random?
No, I don't think anybody can really. And the reason why is because you also work on great stuff that doesn't explode. And there's so many things have to be right for
Give
an
me
album.
an example. When you say so many things, let's explore that.
Okay, so you have to, you start with a great song. You have to have a great performance from everybody. You have a great mix, you know, so then you've got a great record. And then what you need is a really good manager. Hopefully, if you've got management, they have to be great. You have to have really good radio pluggers to get it on the radio in the right places. You have to have good PR. You have to have all of that, plus a little bit of luck along the way that helps people pick up on your record. And it's really about those great records finding the audience that they deserve, which that doesn't always happen. As I'm sure anybody who's worked in it long enough has come across those records or worked on those records that they knew were great and they just didn't happen for whatever reason. And so when they do, things like Amy's album, Adele's album, stuff like that, when they do, it's like all the more great for you that, you know, that you did this great thing and everybody got to hear it. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, but I'm also a strong believer in the sense that true greatness finds its way. It might take time. I mean, there's always that story of the first Pat Metheny album, Bright Side's Life, on ECM Records. And he keeps saying that when that album came out, no one was listening. I mean, they played to like 4 people at the gigs.
Yeah.
And now it's in the Smithsonian as part of like the 100 albums of the
Right.
the century. God knows that.
Yeah. That's
So
actually
sometimes it might take a minute.
Yeah, there's a good parallel actually with as I mentioned earlier, the Pixies. So I was, you know, a fan of them as a kid, and I remember seeing the Bossa Nova tour. That was their 4th album, and they did one night at Hammersmith, which is a mid-sized venue in London. One night there, saw that gig that was the first gig I went to. You know, great. But then they came back after about 20 years off, and they just snowballed. And then they, instead of one night in Hammersmith, they did 4 nights at Brixton, which is twice the size. And it was just, for some reason, that was more their time than it was before. And just fortunate that they had enough going on in their lives that they were able to come back and take advantage of the, you know, the fandom that had built up in their time away. So you're right. Everything's got a chance of having its time, and sometimes it takes a long time. And then it's just a case of, can the musicians still be there? Are they still doing it at that point, you know, when it lands?
I went to see 3 years ago. I went to see the Guns N' Roses reunion tour.
Okay.
And it was an absolute. I don't even know what to call that thing. I always thought that the greatest concerts that I've seen were Keith Jarrett playing solo at Carnegie. I saw Sonny Rollins do some things that you don't think are even possible to a really, really large festival crowd.
Yeah.
I've seen Branford Marsalis at a small place, the Village Vanguard in New York, which is super small.
Okay.
I'm thinking that what it was like to see Colton or something. But then I went to see Guns N' Roses, and it felt like you'd go to the safari in Africa and you see wild animals at their habitat,
right,
functioning, doing what animals do. I mean, it wasn't. You never got a sense that it's a person playing an instrument or a person doing something. It just seemed like, you know what I mean? Like, I see Bono, and and I'm a huge YouTube fan, and you see a person taking a mic and singing, and you see Edge, who I think is a motherfucking genius, and you see him holding this there and picking this there, but those bunch of motherfuckers, what they've done to 90,000 people, it wasn't human beings. Right. It was like it was like seeing a wild beast, right, ravaging. It was really like it's like when actors say you become the part.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like that Jim Carrey thing on Andy Kaufman. Right. It's like it was that thing. And I'm assuming it was so much better than you can see the videos. I also saw them in '93 when I was a kid.
Okay. Yeah. And it was better now than then, was it?
I mean, a million times better.
Right. Great. That's cool.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. That's great.
So I'm going to another project that's actually super dear to my heart, the Sting project, because that album and the one that the studio album, If on a Winter's Night, it was produced by my musical father, by Robert Sadin, the conductor, the producer, and he really raised me musically and otherwise. And so I really know every little note on that album. Right. Every cello part. So when you're there in person, what does it sound like?
Well, so I did the 5.1 mix of that one, of the live at Durham Cathedral. You know, they recorded a whole gig there, and it was beautiful. And I didn't know the record anyway, and I'd worked with Sting before, so I kind of knew what the vibe was. But it was just a beautiful thing to hear it, especially because I heard it in 5.1. So you're more there. You know what I mean? It's even more real and beautiful and lush and everything. So So that was, yeah, it was a really great experience mixing that one. That was cool. And I was working with a guy called Donal Hodgson who'd worked with him for years as his engineer. So he was kind of setting it up, and then I was sort of doing the 5/1 version of and pulling it out a bit, and making it the 5/1 thing, because I'd done quite a lot of 5/1 mixes and stuff. So I got a lot more experience in that. But yeah, it was great. I mean, he's obviously great, and he always surrounds himself with amazing people. So the musicianship around him is always
Yeah,
best.
yeah.
So it's always a great thing to hear what he's up to, and to hear
I
the part.
think that is a very that's not that is key to many solo artists that people don't always think about. Like, I think the both the Amy and Adele albums are a great example. Like, I know a lot of the musicians on those albums personally. It's like
Right.
unbelievable musicians, and I always think about it like kind of like almost like a Tarantino movie. Like, the casting is just so dead on.
Yeah.
So I'm leaving the big stars aside for a second. When you take someone on as a producer,
Yeah.
what do you look for? What do you listen for?
What I'm hearing for really is will my involvement in this project make it better? Am I the person to take? Do I understand what they're looking for, and can I deliver that? Am I the person that can take it forward? So
But many times the artist doesn't know what they're looking for. I mean, perspective is a fickle
yeah,
bit.
yeah. So obviously you kind of hear what their demos are, or see a gig or something like that, and you get a sense of that. And then I sort of have a conversation about influences and things like that. So I can kind of join the dots between, okay, that's what I thought it sounded like, and they're into this band, this band, and this band. So that makes sense. I can see where the middle ground is. I can see where we're sitting here. And sometimes there'll be quite a long way towards a certain band, and then I sort of see my job as drawing themselves out a little bit more. It's like, you're too obviously a fan of this band. We need to get more of you in it, and then try and drag out some other influences, because I'm more about finding out what sort of stuff they're into, because that's what they're naturally gonna be able to do, because they've probably played those songs and they know those songs and things like that. They know that sound, and then it's a case of, right, let's lean it a bit more towards this band for this particular song, and then you get more of their individual sound.
And how long is that process for you? Is this pre-production? Is this in the studio tracking? Like, what are we talking about?
Yeah, it's all of it really. So it starts off with the pre-production. The pre-production is really about arrangement and how's the song going to be structured, because we need to know that before we put the drums down. I mean, you can obviously edit afterwards if you need to, but ideally you're not, and you're getting the drums down with everybody in as close to the final arrangement as as you can possibly, as you can see at that point. And then when it's just when you're moving through the track and deciding what does it need next, when you're doing all your overdubbing and you're choosing your guitar sounds, and if any of this kind of the big synth's going to go on it, and what sounds are we going to go for, and what sort of effects are we going to put on it, and then right through to the mix. Is it going to be, are the drums going to be right up in your face, or are they going to be in the distance, and is this supposed to be knocking you off your feet, or is it supposed to be giving you a big hug, or all of those sort of emotional decisions that you're making with each sound that you're bringing out. That's all fed from, what are the influences, what sound are we trying to make, where does this artist fit, where do they see themselves, kind of almost like who would they be supporting on a tour, who would be a good support slot for them to do, because that's the kind of sound that they're making. All those sort of things can hopefully give you an idea of where the artist wants to be, and deliver that.
That's great. That's great. Any hobbies outside of music that you feel inform your music?
That's a good question. I don't know. I tell you what I do like doing is I like I find it quite what's the word? A bit like meditating, sitting down and making synths. So a lot of what you see behind me, I've made. So you get like the PCBs.
You solder them to yourself?
Exactly. Yeah, you get the PCBs, and then you have like you buy a PCB, and it gives you a list of like resistor number 1 is 100k. So you sit there, and it's
Yeah.
like, did you ever do like painting by numbers as a kid, where it's like number 4 is red, and
I used to do a lot of that with my dad when I was a kid. A lot of like soldering and fixing
right,
and building
yeah,
things, and I keep having this fantasy that when we get together, we'll have time to make an amp one day.
right, yeah,
But I don't see that happening because when I see my dad, we just hang out, talk, and eat.
yeah,
So, and
yeah,
also time is becoming so precious. So
yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's to have the 3 days to solder things.
yeah. But that's what often in the evening I'll spend a couple of hours just doing a bit what I feel is like painting by numbers, but it's just soldering resistors and capacitors into a board, and then I end up
Very
with
cool.
at the end of it. So that's cool.
Very, very cool. So just before I close this up, any for the younger kids watching this, any advice about how to started this to become an engineer or a producer of prominence? How do you get in?
Two things. One is practice as much as you humanly can. Work with as many different people as you can, because working with different projects and different sounds, every time it gives you a different skill. Every time you work with a different thing, and you don't know necessarily what your thing is going to be, what your sound is going to be. So like for me, I tend to work with stuff that's quite organic and warm and natural sounding, with like real deal instruments and things like that. Now I got into it because I wanted to make Pixies records. That's not
Yeah.
the sort of thing that I do anymore. I'm not that kind of out and out guitar band stuff. I do things that are a bit more left field and a bit more interesting than that, or not interesting, but a bit more
Whoa,
left
whoa,
field.
whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that was the wrong word. It's not so much bread and butter, drums, bass, guitar, vocal thing. There'll be more
I
stuff
think
going on.
also the world changed drastically since then.
Yeah, that's
Just
true. So
reality changed.
you don't know necessarily what your thing is going to be. So work with as many different acts and stuff like that as you can, so you can get a more feeling of where you actually enjoy going sonically as a producer or an engineer. So do that as much as possible, and network as much as possible. It's an ugly word and it sounds very corporate, but it's just making friends. So if you say making
Yeah.
friends, that sounds a bit less corporate, but do that as
And
much as possible, because you don't know where your next gig's coming from, or where
yeah.
the interesting gigs are coming from.
So another question for the young kids: 2 or 3 albums of in any time period that you think has the perfect mix, that you think is like the Mount Rushmore of mixing
Ooh.
for your taste.
Yeah, okay, so Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon
Ah.
sounds amazing. Underworld, Boku Fish.
Mhm.
You know that one? That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I tend to just put on stuff I've been listening to lately. So I don't know what I would say is like, well, that one is unbelievable. You know what? I mean, I'm going to say, although it's weird, the Pixies Surfer Rosa, because
Ah.
it's weird. And
It's a very
it's,
specific sound.
yeah, Steve Albini doing a very specific thing about making 4 people sound massive. And it's odd, but I think it's a good thing to learn from. If you're into guitar music at all,
Yeah.
it's really interesting what he did with
Yeah.
that.
Albini is a huge guitar guy, and
Yeah,
he's a huge guy in any sense.
yeah. And actually, another one I'm going to throw in a track, which is Joy Division's Atmosphere, because that one track, it sounds so huge, and even though it was made in 1980, 1979, probably 78, it always sounds like it was done yesterday. It's quite a
Yeah.
remarkable track, that. So, and that's Martin Hamnet, who was also a bit of a sort of maverick genius, but that's an
Amazing.
incredible sounding track.
So last question:
Yeah.
artists that you always dreamed of working with, and it's in the wish list. What's the wish list like?
You know what? I get asked that a lot, and I really should have one together, shouldn't I? I should have a list of people that I think would be.
Present company excluded.
Of course, yeah, because that's number one and always has been. It would be, who would be? I'd love to work with someone like Kate Bush. I think she would be fascinating to work with, because she's just such an interesting character and wants to do interesting things. So You know, you
And
would
also
walk
a
in,
one in a million voice. I mean, you
yeah,
cannot mistake that voice. Yeah.
yeah, that would be incredible. And you know, you'd walk into the record and not know what sort of record you were going to be making. It
Yeah.
would just evolve as you went through, and then it would be something incredible at the end. And yeah, and a chance to work with her singing would be second to none. That would be amazing. So yeah, that's
Perfect.
Kate Bush.
All right, man. I'm just so happy to be able to pick your brains for all this valuable bag of tips. Thanks so much for coming on. You've been an inspiration in so many ways, and I'm sure to many, many people watching. Uh, be safe, be cool,
And you,
uh, and again, just thank you. And I'll take it back. I'll bring it back to Lewis in the studio. Lewis, you there?
sorry.
And also thanks for sure to making the only mic that I would wanna record guitars with ever. That to be said.
Thank you.